Hey, everybody, I'm the Ranting Monkey, and with me, as always, is Scribe. Say hi, Scribe.
Hi, Scribe.
And welcome to Movies You Should Have Watched, the episode we probably shouldn't have done.
Exactly. Movies you should have watched that we never did.
Yeah, this is the first one that we hadn't seen before when we decided to go ahead and review it. And the reason we decided to review it is because Liam Neeson has said he's no longer going to be in the action genre.
Mm-hmm.
He's retiring from it because he says he's too old.
But he does have two movies upcoming, one which is him as a snowplow driver fighting drug dealers. Every time I say that, I think, this is the kind of thing you say in an elevator pitch that's literally in an elevator. Hey, Liam Neeson as a drug-dealing fighter snowplow driver called Hard Powder.
Hard Powder. It reminds me of those. There were several movies in the 80s where somebody would move into a small town that was just overrun by drugs and they would beat the whole drug gang.
Yeah, I mean it's like Walking Tall, and
yeah.
That's not even an 80s movie, but that kind of setup where it's like, the lone stranger shows up and cleans everything up. I mean, it's a very old sort of narrative. The lone gunman comes to the Wild West town that's all corrupt and beats up all the bad guys.
Indeed, yes. Except for it doesn't work as well when you're not in the Old West with your 6-shooter on your side.
Yeah, and you got cell phones and the internet and everything else. And yeah, I mean, I would love to see a callback to some classic sort of Westerns. I don't know if that'll... I'm wondering when that genre is going to come back, but that's another conversation.
Yeah, for this movie...
Wait, before we start, I got three things I want to say before we start the review, just as watchwords, and I want to see what your reaction is when I say these three. Actually, they're concepts or movie titles: Total Recall, Jason Bourne, Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Because as I was watching this movie, all three of those things were highlighted in my brain as I watched this.
Well, the thing that I was going to say. Was that, am I wrong to say that this movie desperately wanted to be Jason Bourne?
Little bit. And before we go any further, just so everybody knows, this is hold on real quick. This is complete spoilers. There is no way to talk about this film because it is effectively a mystery movie after a fashion. So if you have not seen this movie and you intend to see this movie, do not listen to this if you don't want to have it completely spoiled. Not that you couldn't probably figure it out on your own, because I sure as fuck did when I got about halfway through the movie. But all the same, if you don't want to have everything ruined for you, don't listen any further.
The reason I said we shouldn't have done this movie is not because it's not a decent movie. I would actually recommend this to people if you were looking for a fun movie. It would be the least of the ones we've done so far that I would recommend, but it's not a horrible movie. But the reason I say we shouldn't have done this one is because the only way to do it is to spoil the whole fucking thing. There's just no way around it.
Right.
So, if you are planning on watching it, what you need to do right now is stop us and listen to us after you watch the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because as I watched this, the first half of it, before it became apparent what was going on,
mm-hmm.
I thought this was one of the worst movies I had ever seen. Let's start with the opening. They did the Jason Bourne thing with the opening.
Yeah, well, so this is actually surprisingly, given Liam Neeson's sort of pedigree with action movies, this is a PG-13 movie, which I was kind of surprised at when I first saw that. It's based on a novel. I have no idea how good the novel is or anything. It said so in the beginning. It's also produced by Dark Castle Entertainment, which, for those of you who are not in the movie knows of things, that started out as a production company specifically geared towards remaking the old horror films of William Castle. Its first movie was House on Haunted Hill, then it went to 13 Ghosts and House of Wax and stuff like that. It eventually branched out in other movies, of course, because you can't quite stick to that one genre and survive. But it's kind of odd to see their logo on this kind of movie, but what are you going to do?
I don't know about it being based on a book. I missed that part. I was doing other things as the credits were rolling at the beginning, and several movies in the 90s did this in this genre, and then of course it carried over to the 2000s, and obviously here it landed smack on it. It starts off with an innocuous thing going on. In this case, them landing at the airport and getting in a cab.
Yeah, so we zoom in on Liam Neeson and his wife, played by January Jones, who I have to say gives one of the most boring performances I've seen.
Oh, she's so stale.
She is. I mean, and truth be told, if you watch her in X-Men First Class, now I haven't seen her much outside of Mad Men, but the couple times I have seen her outside of Mad Men, she's been completely wooden and completely boring. And so, but in this, she's no different. She's just kind of there. But the two of them are on a plane and they're landing in Berlin.
The part that really irritates me is that soft, goddamn light piano music playing over it.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. Oh. We are the loving couple. Everything's gentle. Everything's fine. Obviously, things are going to get worse, but right now we're in sort of a sort of heavenly state. I mean, even at the beginning, like we see this peach colored clouds as we zoom out from the outside into the plane. You know, oh, it's so heavenly and peaceful, and everything's so nice. So they start having a little bit of conversation as they land in Berlin, and we learn bits and pieces about who these people are. They're there in Berlin for a biotechnology summit. They are Mr. and Mrs. Harris. And they go through the routine of landing at the airport, going through customs, and then going out to their cab. And the first sort of plot device that occurs is that as they get into their cab, one of the guy's briefcases is accidentally left behind, and we see this, the audience, they don't. And then they head to the hotel in the cab, and along the way, it's semi-relevant. The wife is looking through a magazine and she sees an ad for, what was it, Isabel Kronenberger, which is some like artist, and they're like, oh, look, didn't we see this back in Chicago? Oh, we should stop by and take a look while we're here. You know, as soon as now, before I knew very little about this movie except that it had something to do with identities and stuff because of unknown. I knew it was about a missing wife. That's as much as I knew from what I remembered from trailers and such. But as soon as I knew it was going to be a mystery, everything, it's one of those old adages. An artist never puts a drop of paint on a canvas unintentionally. So everything in this movie that made itself known to the audience as significant, I paid real close attention to, because I knew it was going to come up later.
You had an advantage over me here because I knew nothing about this film, nothing other than Liam Neeson is in it, and the pack that this movie is a part of that we started this with. It had Tango and Cash, The Last Boy Scout, Under Siege, Next of Kin, and then this movie. All of the other ones are decidedly action movies. This one just isn't.
It's a thriller, more or less.
It's a thriller, not an action movie. And while like The Bourne Identity could be classified as both, this one really can't. There's very little action in this movie. So I went into it expecting an action movie, so I was not paying attention to all the details. I got them as they became relevant.
Sure.
But yeah, I wasn't paying attention to everything, like her mentioning that they'd gone to the Chicago thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it was a complete surprise what was going on. And it's part of what ruined the beginning of the movie for me, because what happens, we can jump ahead a little here if you're cool.
Sure.
We'll do a quick synopsis. They get to the hotel. She goes in. He doesn't, because he realizes the briefcase is missing. He immediately hails a cab and heads back to the airport. On their way back to the airport, there's traffic, so he asks the cab driver if she could take another route. She does. They end up in a car accident, fall into the river. He bumps his head real hard. Cab driver saves him. He wakes up in the hospital 4 days later. Not real sure what exactly has happened.
Right.
He's starting to get his memory back a little bit, and he remembers he left his wife at a hotel, and he remembers the name of the hotel. And
what happens is that he wakes up in the hospital, and he the first sign that something's decidedly wrong is that he's been there 4 days and no one has come looking for him.
Yes,
that's the first sort of signal to both the audience and the character that something's up. I mean, his wife was there. He's sort of a known quantity. The accident was kind of, out in public and such. There's no reason why somebody wouldn't have come and tried to claim him. But he's sitting there in the hospital and he's trying to like get a sense of what's going on. Doesn't know where his wife is. All of his identification was lost in the crash, by the way. He has no ID on him at all. All he has is his memories of who he is and his wife, and they land in Berlin and everything. And he's sitting there and he's watching television in the hospital room, and he sees a little piece on the biotechnology conference, and they go over a couple of the key figures there, which of course will become important later. There's a Dr. Bressler, and there's a Prince Schada, who these two guys are working together to promote this conference and supposedly going to reveal some big technological breakthrough. And in the course of that piece, they show the hotel that the conference is taking place at. And he's like, oh, yeah, right, that's the hotel I was going to. And so he's like, I got to get to that hotel.
Well, and with his ID was all in that briefcase.
Right.
The only thing he had on him is a little book that he always carries with him that his dad gave him.
And a watch that has an engraving on the back with his and his wife's initials.
Yes, which he was wearing at the time.
Yeah, and in the back of this little book are a set of numbers that have no meaning to him or the audience at that point. And so that
is the dumbest clue thing ever.
I will talk more about that because less and less makes sense about that particular item as we learn more about its significance in the story. But
yeah, so he finally remembers where he's supposed to be, and he runs off to meet his wife against doctor's orders. And he gets to the hotel, and they don't know him, and of course he has no ID, so they're not just going to let him go in. But he does see a party going on, and he sees his wife there. So he goes running off to that, and security stops him, but the manager of the hotel allows him to go up to his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And here's where the first real twist jumps out at you. The hotel manager takes him over to his wife, who doesn't know him. In fact, she has a whole different husband with the same name.
Who's played by Aidan Quinn, of all people, who I haven't seen in the movie.
Old.
Yeah, he did. For a second, I was like, is that? I was like, yeah, that's Aidan Quinn. I mean, for a very brief second, I thought it was the guy who played Sledgehammer on that old parody cop show.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I was like, no, wait, that's Aidan Quinn. I was like, God, I haven't seen him in forever.
When I say he looked old, I don't mean he looked bad. I mean, he aged pretty well, but
yeah, no, yeah. I mean, you could tell it was him. Yeah, he looked old.
And this is one of the first parts that really irritated me about this movie, because if you go up to your wife and not only does she not know you, but she has a whole new husband, you are not going to be as calm and cool-headed as he was. You're going to lose your shit and end up in jail. Yeah,
in relative terms. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He was just like,
even though Liam Neeson has this very, let's be honest, I mean, he wasn't acting completely cool the entire time. He was getting a little crazed in places, but yeah, he wasn't getting as crazy as a normal person would. That's true.
The first thing he would, bitch, what are you talking about? I mean, nothing. He's just like, but that's my wife. And then, no, you'd be like, bitch, you done lost your fucking mind. What's wrong with you? So yeah, that's the first place that I had a real issue with the movie.
The other thing that I had, this is the first of a couple of instances where I thought, okay, given what we learn about the amount of prestige and security revolving around this thing, also given the details of the past events that have occurred to Prince Schada, which we'll get to later, the fact that some guy runs up claiming to be somebody he's not and causing a whole bunch of ruckus should have set off several other alarm bells with several other people there that it never did.
Yeah, so at the point we're seeing it, it kind of makes sense. But when you find out that how many times somebody's tried to assassinate the prince like 3 or 4 times, including
something like that. Yeah,
one that they have on video where a suicide bomber blows himself up.
Yeah,
but they're just letting this guy in. Yeah, fuck it. He says that blonde is his wife. Let him in.
Yeah, that was a little off. The other thing too in this sequence is that after he confronts his wife and his doppelganger, let's say, for lack of a better phrase, they take him back to a security room. He says, "No, look up the security footage from the day that we showed up," and they do. And surprise, surprise, the wife and our fake husband are there on the video because he never entered the hotel. He was out there in with the briefcase or looking for the briefcase.
No. In the video we see it's just her, and they tell him that he showed up, that the doctor showed up at 3 p.m. later that day.
Yeah, and then they show footage of that, and then it's him and her.
Yeah, him and her. Yeah,
yeah. That's yeah.
But when they actually show up, yeah, it was just her because he never walked into the hotel.
Right. Now here's the first thing that I thought of. As soon as we see that picture of him and her at the counter, the next logical thing for any smart person to say is, well, go back to the airport security footage.
Yep.
There's no way. I mean, we're not. If this movie was taking place in like 1975 or something, they would have a hell of a lot easier time with some of these problems, at least as far as the plot's concerned. But in this instance, we're talking about 14 or 15 or something. And there's no way that he wasn't picked up or recognized or seen by about 17 different people between the airport and the hotel.
Well, that's the other thing is he says, do a search for me because he works at a university.
Right.
And they do a search and it's not him. It's the other guy.
Yeah, they Google him and they find out, oh, it's a picture of the other guy that's already at the hotel under the doctor's name, Dr. Martin Harris. And
when they first get there, he goes, do a search for me. And isn't it amazing how many people in Germany just speak English?
Actually, that's not uncommon.
Yeah,
that's true. I mean, we can ask our resident Badger about this at some point, but it is not uncommon. Yes, we can ask Minding Freedom. I said it right.
Yes, you did. What I do find odd is that when they pull up to the hotel, they're immediately speaking English and know that it's an English person. Maybe there's a trick that they know about that. But anyway, he says to him, do a search for me. And they said, we did. And there's all these different Dr. Martin, whatever the fuck his name was.
Martin Harris.
Martin Harris. Thank you. But nobody thought immediately to just do the search for him at the school.
Yeah.
That would have been the first thing you search. But again, there's certain things they had to do for the plot to work here. And I wonder, with this being based off a book, how old the book is. If maybe it made more sense if it was written, say, in even the late 90s, it would have made more sense.
Well, let's see. This is 2011. Let's see if I can find.
Find where the book was written.
Yeah, it's based on the book, the 2003 French novel called Out of My Head. Okay, and I want to see if I can find a plot synopsis for that. But anyway, go ahead.
2003 would make a lot more sense. It really would, because
it was written in 2003. Doesn't mean it was set in 2003. So I'll try to find out.
But even with that, I mean, even if it was set perfectly modern day at that time, it would have been a lot harder to search somebody than it is than it was in 2011, when all you do is, where do you work?
True.
Oh, look, there you are.
True. Yes, that's true.
Especially if you work at a fucking public university.
Yeah. So our guy, he convinces the hotel guy to say, look, I obviously I'm very confused. I was seeing a doctor. Here's this card that he gave me, because we meet two important characters at the hospital. We meet the doctor that's sort of looking after him, and a nurse who is very friendly to him and sort of sympathetic. So he convinces them to let him get back into a cab and go off to his doctor. Instead, he stops the cab early. And this brings up another interesting element of the story that doesn't make any sense. He's lost all of his ID. He has no personal items on him, and yet he has plenty of cash on hand this entire time.
Never runs out of money.
Never runs out of money. I mean, at one point he does try to hand everything he has to a particular character, which we'll get to later, but all the same, he's never wanting for cash, despite the fact that all of his personal goods apparently went down with the cab. But okay, so he stops the cab early, he gets out, and he starts stalking his wife and the fake husband. Yes. So I made a note about no ID but plenty of cash. So he decides that he will go back to, he's going to try to solve this mystery. So he heads to a subway to take the subway somewhere, I guess, even though he's never been to Berlin before and somehow he knows where to go. Goes down a subway, and he's chased by a very specific looking individual.
Let me talk about this for a moment.
Sure.
Because he goes down this long subway hallway. And just because, for some reason, he's the only one there, which, okay, it's nighttime. But when he gets on the train, he's not the only one there.
Right.
He freaks out just because he hears footsteps behind him. Doesn't
Well, you see, given what we find out about him later. Okay.
Well, we know later, sure.
Sure, well, yeah, but like I say, after seeing the whole movie, there's a lot of moments leading up to the big reveals that I try to think to myself, okay, maybe this is old instincts.
Is this going to be another movie where you're a lot more charitable than I am?
Oh, I'm just well, maybe a little bit in the sense that you know, it could be, and like I say, I am being charitable, but let's say for just for the sake of argument, that some of the things that seem inexplicable in the beginning of the movie make more sense when you understand that maybe these are instincts coming back to him that he's just not aware of, and they're pertinence to his real situation.
And I would give you that if, let me do the if here.
Yes.
If it wasn't so selective.
Okay.
But we can let's move on with the plot.
Let's move on. So anyway, so this guy chases him up to the point of getting into the subway, and he gets in the subway just before this guy does, and we see his face very clearly through the window, so we get an idea of what he looks like, because this is going to be important later. So he makes his way to the cab company, because as he was trying to, he stopped to do two things. He stopped to get he went to a phone book and looked up the laboratory where the doctor he was supposed to meet at this conference works at, because he's sure there's only like one or two people in Germany who could possibly identify him. That's his wife is one. The other one is the doctor that he's been communicating with through the phone and email for months leading up to the conference. He's never met the guy, and this is Dr. Bressler, which we'll find out more about later. But as he's going to the phone book to try to look up Bressler in his lab, which he tears a page out of the phone book to do, he sees a cab off to the side, and it has the same logo symbol as he saw in the cab before he crashed in the water. So he goes to the cab company to try to find the cab driver who drove him around at the time, because she might have some information or be able to at least verify his story. And the funny part about this is he goes to the cab company like supervisor or whatever, and the guy says, you know, she's not here anymore. She crashed my cab. She cost me 20,000 euro or whatever for that cab. And he says something like, illegal immigrants are destroying this country.
Yes.
And standing next to him is a black man. We find out his name Biko or Biko. So Liam Neeson gets a hint from looking at this guy's body language that Biko knows who he's talking about. Oh, he was translating for the cab owner. That's why he was there. Yes. And so outside of the office, he talks to Biko and he says, "Hey, you know where she is, don't you?" And he gives him some money and he says, "Okay, well, this is where she is. Just because that's what you do, I guess."
Yeah, you always sell out your friends.
Yeah, you sell it to your friend for a couple of bucks, which we find out later they're like close friends, which is weird.
This is another one of those times where it might have been his instincts kicking in, but watching that scene, I didn't see anything that gave away he'd know where she was.
Yeah, me too. I didn't either. That's why it was so odd when he approaches him afterwards. I thought I must have missed something somewhere, because I didn't. Yeah, nothing he was doing seemed to say, "Oh, I know more about this than I'm saying," because he wasn't saying anything. He was translating for the other guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so after he gets the information on the cab driver, he then goes to the labs we were talking about of Dr. Bressler. And yeah,
here comes my second biggest complaint about this movie.
This is such a weird scene.
It's an interesting scene once you know the whole story. So Liam Neeson shows up at the university and asks for Dr. Bressler and says that he has an appointment with him, because he does remember that he was supposed to have a meeting with this guy, because when he showed up in Germany, he did have an itinerary, which in this case was meeting with the doctor. So he goes, the desk stops him because he doesn't have ID and they're going to call. And so he just kind of slips away. He slips away, figures out where the doctor's lab is, and goes up there himself. And once he gets there, what does he find? His doppelganger, although they don't really look alike or sound alike.
No, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, we'll just call it that for the rest of this. Let's call it his twin. It's easier to say.
Sure.
So his twin is there, and they have this really, it's kind of a neat exchange where they literally mimic each other.
Yeah, they're trying to. Yeah, go ahead.
They're trying to prove to the doctor that they're the real Martin Harris, and in doing so, Liam Neeson starts talking about a phone call he had with Dr. Bressler. And the two of them, Liam Neeson and his twin, start repeating the exact same lines. I mean, perfectly. Now, here's where I have the problem with this. Liam Neeson and what the hell's his name?
Aidan Quinn.
Aidan Quinn sound nothing alike.
Yes.
Nothing.
Right.
If you were talking to the two of them on the phone, you would definitely be able to tell which was which. Liam Neeson especially has a very, very unique voice. So for this guy to be confused and not be going, yeah, this is the guy I talked to, I can tell by his voice. Right. It's just like, oh, are you fucking kidding? I understand they needed to do it for the movie, but that really broke the illusion for me.
And the other thing too is that, especially at the point at which they exactly talk over each other with the exact same verbiage and line, the whole 9 yards. Again, this should have brought up so many freaking red flags. And you can see it on the doctor's face. I mean, the guy playing the doctor, you know, actually, it was a really interesting scene taken out of context of everything else, because it was almost comedic in a way. But yeah, the doctor's reaction is kind of like, whoa, wait a second, this is really weird, which should have been like a something the fuck is wrong here.
Yeah.
This doesn't make any sense, because if one of these guys is legitimate, there's no way the other one can be, so something is off. And yet, as soon as the cops show up, because that's when Aidan Quinn pulls out his ID, his super duper's license, driver's license and everything, that shows that he is Martin Harris. And then the cops show up and sort of shuffle him out.
Okay, guys,
Liam Neeson.
For what I have to talk about next week, we have to spoil the end of this movie for you. So if you haven't seen it yet and you want to, stop watching now, come back and rewatch the live stream later.
Yeah. Now, so real quick, sorry.
I'd say, because I do have to spoil the movie for what I want to talk about next. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. Okay. So just to make sure we get to the transition. So as soon as he sees the identification showing that he really is Martin Harris, Liam Neeson's character basically faints and passes out. Yes. And then he wakes up again in the hospital.
Going back to the scene where they're talking over each other.
Yes.
In his line of work and in what they were doing, because for those of you who don't know, here comes the big spoiler. Last chance to turn away. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Liam Neeson is an assassin, and they have this this story, you know, their background story that they have to go by. Memorizing a background story is not the same as memorizing a phone call and then repeating it word for word how the other person would say it.
Yeah.
That whole scene, it's neat. It's a interesting idea, but that scene broke the whole fucking movie for me. It really did.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense. I mean, for what we find out later about the whole situation, it doesn't make logical sense, even in this little world we're living in. No. Yeah, in the context of everything else, it's, like I say, not only is it a red flag for anybody within the movie itself, but it's also the fuck's going on for the audience, because it doesn't jive.
Yeah, I know what they were trying to do there, but they ruined it by the way they did it.
Yeah, and a couple things we find out in that scene that become important later is that Dr. Bressler has 2 young daughters named Lily and Laurel. Now, this is important to the plot. It's also one of the most confusing portions of the plot, but we'll get there eventually.
Yes.
So Liam Neeson wakes up back at the hospital, and he's being tested again. They're going to give him an MRI. The friendly nurse, who's taking pity on him and really wants to help him, gives him the name of essentially a private investigator that she knows that might be able to help him find missing persons, because that's kind of what situation he's in, or at least claims to be in. So that's a very important part of the story, that he gets this card for this guy named Jurgen. And then he's put into an MRI in order to sort of check to see, is there some kind of brain damage? Is there something else going on? And so he's locked down and he's been drugged. And as he's in the MRI, he starts having flashbacks to shower sex with his wife.
Yes, wasn't that gratuitous?
A little bit. It went on awfully long. And again, no nudity is shown. This is a PG-13 movie, so there's nothing explicit particularly shown. It just went on a few beats too long than it needed to. But we do see, as we saw very briefly earlier in some of his other flashbacks, because he's had a couple of flashbacks before, but in this one in particular, we see that his wife, for some reason, at some point, had brunette hair and it was shorter.
Yes.
So this, if he hadn't caught it earlier, this tells us that there's something off, not only with his memories, but the reality of what we're seeing. But we learn more later, obviously. But as he comes out of the MRI, the subway man shows up. And he immediately snaps the nurse's neck and leaves her dead body on the floor. And Liam Neeson has now been tied down and drugged by this guy. And as the guy's moving the lady's body, or he's off in another room doing something or getting something else prepared. And Liam Neeson reaches down, grabs the scissors out of the nurse's coat out of her pocket or whatever. And so the guy comes back, and as he's moving the body away, Liam Neeson frees himself and stumbles into the hospital. Down the hall, gathers his clothes and everything else, and tries to escape. Now, this is another point where I was like, you're in a hospital full of people. You are a known quantity at this point. This guy isn't. Mm-hmm. Why aren't you calling for help and pointing him out? Because he obviously does not belong there. But he doesn't do that.
He just killed somebody, and all you have to do is
he just snapped the lady's neck. Yeah, he snapped the lady's neck, left her in there. You're all drugged up. Everybody knew where you were and that you were supposed to be there. This guy is not a doctor. He doesn't belong there. He's obviously a killer. Why aren't you stopping? Because there's a whole bunch of like paramedics and like people around because some big accident happened, and that's why the hospital's so busy. Anyway,
it kind of looks like they're in an emergency room that they're going through.
Yeah.
But it's a hallway.
Yeah, it was really weird. But okay, so he stumbles out and he gets himself dressed and runs out of the hospital, and the guy loses him. And then
wait, can we stop for 1 second there? Yeah. He also, while he's running from this guy, but while the guy is still pretty much in where he can see him, stops to put on his shoes.
Yeah, well, they are slip-on shoes. We did see oftentimes that these are like little slip-on booties. These aren't like lace-ups.
That's still weird to me.
It is weird, but they went to great lengths at every time that we saw him getting his clothes being given to him or something, that we saw that he's got these slip-on shoes. Again, I'm being very, very generous here, but
you so are.
I'm not giving it any credit. I'm just saying that there is an explanation as to the speed with which he gets his shoes on. It doesn't make it better. It's an explanation.
So he gets away.
He gets away, and then he runs to the first thing he does, and this is another thing that's odd, because this movie ostensibly takes place in the modern time, in 2011 or whatever.
Yeah.
And this is the second time that he runs to a phone booth in Germany. Now, I don't know how many phone booths there are remaining in Germany. Maybe there are a ton. I don't know. But he runs to a phone booth, and then he calls the hotel room, I guess trying to get his wife, because that's where the call goes. And, of course, the twin answers, and so he hangs up, doesn't say anything. It was really weird.
He called a cell phone.
Was it a cell phone? Oh,
the twin answers a cell phone.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the hotel phone. I was like, why is he calling the hotel room? Okay.
And way back in the first time he was in the hospital, he couldn't remember the phone number to give them, because they asked, does your wife have a cell phone? Of course she does.
Yeah.
So it's like he remembered the cell phone number, so he decided to call it, but they don't make that clear. It
was really out of place. Anyway, so then he looks down and he's got that card from the nurse that's now dead for Jurgen, the PI. Mm-hmm. And he goes to find Jurgen, the PI, and it turns out it's Klaus Kinski, who played Nosferatu in the 79 version and was also Hitler in Downfall, which that whole meme comes from. Mm-hmm. And I was like, Klaus Kinski, holy cow, because he's like a famous actor. I was like, God, Aidan Quinn, Klaus Kinski, wow, this is all over the place. And it doesn't end there, but we'll get there eventually. And so we learn that Klaus Kinski, very, very bluntly and very openly, he says, yes, I'm former Stasi. I'm former East German police. I'm basically an old retired spy. Here's all my stuff that I was former Stasi. It make this very clear that he's an old Cold Warrior.
And not only is he's got all the plaques and pictures of himself on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. He's just like, oh, but I am not ashamed of the fact that I was basically, part of the secret police of the communist bloc back then. And he says something like, I forget exactly what the line is, but he says like Germans aren't good at remembering things or something, like they forgot that they were Nazis. They also forgot they were 40 years of communism. And like, wow, this is, there's like some little sort of like sour commentary going on there. That was just kind of like, but I really liked this character for as brief as we see him. I mean, Klaus Kinski is a veteran actor. And so I hate something that's relative. You didn't like him?
I think it was a misuse of a good actor. Yeah. Because his character is basically there for no fucking reason.
He's there for exposition as to, I mean, his only purpose is his inevitable, his eventual, I should say, interaction with a different character that tells us more exposition about the backstory. That's basically he doesn't offer anything else really to it, except as a little bit of a helper, because he does help out Liam Neeson and the cab driver very briefly.
But other than well, even with that, with what we find out about the other character, we find that out anyway. We find that out in the garage, which we'll get to, because that fucking scene.
Well, it also adds, I mean, the other thing he brings to it is a bit of history to the situation that Liam Neeson is involved in, because if you want to talk about like international intrigue, and this is kind of like a spy novel kind of thing, the one thing he brings to it is that there's a backstory to what's going on that goes back as far as the Cold War, that it's got its basis in a whole bunch of other things. So I think this is elements from the novel that were probably far more better explained, that this kind of weaved into this thing.
I would hope so, because as it stands, sorry, I had to lean away from my microphone for a second. As it stands, you could literally take him out of the movie and it wouldn't change anything.
The only thing that I was really entertained by the PI, aside from sort of like the weird, like the scene later where he dies is very, like I say, in and of itself, it's kind of a cool scene, but in the context of the movie, it's pretty pointless. But the one thing I did enjoy was after we cut from Liam Neeson telling him his entire story to this point, the PI basically plays Cinema Sins, and he says, well, you know, like these people are conspiring against you, but obviously they couldn't have plans for some random accident and all these other things.
Yes.
It's not like, I mean, they're people, they're not gods. And I was kind of like, yes, exactly. We're not living in some kind of like alternate reality science fiction film here. There is a reasonable, and I put quotation marks around that word, reasonable explanation for how this is the way it is, which I appreciated, because I was kind of like, okay, please tell me the writers aren't taking that many liberties with reality.
Because at this point, if you just go by what you've seen on the screen, not a goddamn thing makes sense. Nothing.
No, not really. I mean, I had, like I say, I had notions of stuff, because as soon as I saw her hair was different in that one flashback, that was the clue that told me this is a setup, and he's a part of it. He just doesn't know it. That was my first thought when I saw her with the dark hair, is that he's remembering two versions of her because he's in on whatever's going on. I didn't know what exactly at that point, but I knew that I had an inkling of what the truth was at that particular moment back at the MRI scan. But anyway, so he leaves the PI because the PI says, well, you need to talk to this taxi driver. You need to bring her here to me so I can talk to her and ask her some questions, because right now she's the only person that could possibly verify your story, which isn't true, because at least, like I said, the doorman at the hotel, the paramedics, I mean, anybody on this, it's just, anyway.
We even get a glimpse of the fact that it could be other people, because later when he arrives back at his house right before his demise, what does he find? Pictures from the fucking airport.
Well, yeah, that was the other thing too. The PI eventually calls the airport, because, like I said at the beginning of the movie to myself, when they showed the footage from the hotel lobby, I said, well, why the fuck aren't you calling the airport? If there's any place in this entire city that's going to have cameras left, right, and center, it's going to be the fucking airport at Berlin.
Yeah.
So you just have to prove that, but they never. But of course, the only guy to think to do that is the PI. He calls up an old friend who, by implication, is some old Stasi retired spy as well, because that's the hint we get.
In post 9/11 world, the only people who think to check the airport footage is the old secret police.
Yeah, the retired East German bloc. Anyway, so our Martin Harris, Dr. Harris, Liam Neeson, he goes to find the taxi driver, and because he uses the information he got from Biko or Biko, whatever his name was, back at the taxi place, and he finds her working at as a waitress, because she like fled as soon as she crashed that car. She's in the country illegally. She's not supposed to be there. We find out later she's from Bosnia, and so she's working at a restaurant. He confronts her at the restaurant, and he talks her into talking to the PI that he wants her to talk to, and he gives her his watch as collateral. He says, well, look, here, this is worth at least $5,000 or something. You can take this. And
you have two parts there.
Because
when he first sees her at the restaurant, she kicks him out and won't talk to him at all.
Yes, that's true.
He catches up with her later. This is the part that I really love about this, because she won't talk to him at the restaurant. And granted, she's on the clock, so maybe that's why.
Mm-hmm.
But he tracks her down late at night as she's leaving work. And suddenly, not only is she open to talking to him, she lets him stay in her house.
Yeah.
Because reasons. That happens all the time. When you're an illegal alien, what you really want to do is help somebody who's running from the police.
Yes.
Harbor them.
Yeah, some strange American who doesn't remember who he is and wants you to talk to some stranger PI. Yeah, the personal logic of this doesn't make any fucking sense. So
I just want to reiterate, I still like the movie. It's not the greatest movie ever. But it's not horrible. So as we're bashing this, please understand it's still a decent movie.
Yeah, no, it was entertaining. I mean, it's just like, for nitpickers like me and Monkey. Yeah,
you can't put much thought into it. Is all.
No, don't think too deeply. Some of the concepts are neat. I'll wager, I'll have to look it up, that maybe the novel's a better option if you're looking for this kind of story. But now, between him talking to the taxi driver and ending up at her house, we do get some more exposition provided to us by the PI, who goes to the internet, has to be shown how to use the internet by the internet cafe person there. And he looks up the website for the conference, the biotech conference, and we first learn about the assassination attempt on the prince previously, where a guy blew himself up as he was giving a speech.
Yes.
So we learn that this prince, who is effectively funding this conference or sponsoring it, as well as the Dr. Bressler that we've talked so much about, he is under threat and has been on several occasions because, well, we find out later that he's like his actions in trying to support biotech goes against certain corporate interests, and therefore he's an enemy of big money, and they're trying to assassinate him and other things. So
yeah, the basic part of that, and this doesn't really spoil anything. It's a pretty common plot point for this kind of movie.
Mm-hmm.
What they're trying to do is make food a non-issue in the world anymore. They come up with this new strain of corn that will grow anywhere.
Yeah, cure world hunger.
And the prince is going to give it away for free.
Right, which of course threatens everybody.
Yes.
So Liam Neeson is now crashing at illegal immigrant Bosnian pretty model-esque white girl's apartment.
Yeah, she looks pretty good for somebody who's escaped Bosnia. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, escaped Bosnia, living in abject poverty, etc. Anyway, so he asks if he can take a shower, and she's like, okay. And so while he's taking a shower,
this is another part. Go ahead with the shower, because I may be jumping.
Well, there's one part that doesn't make any sense either, where so he's going to take a shower. He goes into the bedroom area next to the shower, and on the dresser is like an art book.
Yes. And
he sits down to look at the art book, and she gets all possessive about the art book, and then they have this sort of one-on-one talk. And I understand it's character building and started trying to establish a relationship kind of thing between these two, but it's just really awkward and weird. And then they hear like two people having sex in the room next door because the walls are quote unquote made of cardboard, which we find out in short order they actually are made of cardboard. But
these two have no chemistry.
None at all. Zero. And it's not necessarily the actor's fault or anything. They were just given a really weird scene to try to have some kind of moment.
Well, it's also, I mean, this is one of the major parts where I say this movie is trying so hard to be the Bourne Identity. If you remember in the Bourne Identity, he hooks up with the chick who...
The German chick, the European girl. Yeah.
Who's trying to... What was she trying to... Oh, yeah, she's trying to save up money.
Yes.
Which is the same thing this girl's trying to do.
Yes.
She's trying to save up money so she can become a legal citizen.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw that part, I'm like, are you fucking kidding? This is straight out of Bourne Identity.
Yeah, there's a lot of Bourne Identity in this, including some action scenes, which we're almost at. But so as he's taking the shower, before the shower, Biko showed up to check in on her, and he gave her his keys to his cab that she needs for a short time to get around, I guess. And this is important because
she needed it to she was going to go on. She said she had to work. She was going to take another shift using his cab.
Oh, I see. Okay. So so she takes his keys, and then Baiko leaves. Then Liam Neeson takes a shower. And as he's taking the shower, Subway guy shows up.
Dun, dun, dun.
And dun dun dun. And I couldn't help but think, this is like the line stuck in my head now. Then a second bad guy shows up, and the first thing that jumped to my head is, "You don't know my friend here, but he's been waiting to meet you." It's like, who is this guy? He just came out of nowhere. Okay, so we have bad guy 1 and bad guy 2.
That line has ruined movies for us.
It really has. And of course, they're both wearing all black.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't get more like, hey, let's be completely conspicuous and wearing nothing but black. And like, you guys are the worst spy. These are the bad guys, just so you know.
In case you missed it.
Yeah, so then Liam Neeson hears the commotion. He slips. So this is the thing. So he's naked and wet in the shower. I'm relaying these events as they must have happened as you see them in the movie, because it makes no fucking sense. Liam Neeson in the shower, completely naked, covered in water, hears the commotion outside, immediately grabs his clothes, slips out, but somewhere between grabbing his clothes and getting out this little window in the bathroom, he puts all of his clothes on.
Yes.
Gets outside into the dead of winter. Okay, he's completely covered in water, and now he's started pulling clothes on over a wet body. In the dead of winter, he opens up the window and then sort of fakes out that he had climbed down to the street, and instead he's hiding on the other side of the roof, hanging on by fingertips, until bad guy number 2 follows him. Now, Liam Neeson doesn't know how many guys are in the apartment. He doesn't know what's going on, but somehow he knows that this guy's going to do exactly what he does. Otherwise, he's just hanging out on a roof the entire time. But then once he sees that the guy's left, he climbs himself back up, gets back into the apartment, and then whammies the bad guy number 1, the Subway guy, with like a crowbar or something that he found somewhere.
Yeah, he's got a crowbar for no goddamn reason.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a fixture from the bathroom, but bathroom fixtures are usually like hollow and made of the lightest fucking material. So I don't know.
And this is one of my problems with this is he never hits the guy in the head.
No.
This is a man, he's watched this guy kill somebody. And he's just going to hit him in the side a little bit.
There might be a reason for that. And this isn't me being like generous to the movie so much as I don't know what the standards are between a PG-13 and an R. There are some really esoteric rules about what qualifies one for the other. And wailing somebody into the head with a crowbar might be one of those things. I don't know. But of course, if he had, he wouldn't have had the situation where he's on the ground being held down by this guy and he has to be saved again by our taxi driver.
Who is the baddest ass person in this movie? I'm not going to lie.
Pretty much. I mean,
the best fighter in the movie.
Yeah, the bad guy number 1, before he got wailed on by Liam Neeson, he was going to try to inject taxi driver lady with something in this specialty little syringe thing that looks like a lighter, but he drops it in the course of the fight. And as Liam Neeson's struggling with him on the ground, she picks it up and jabs it into the guy's neck and kills him. So they escape as bad guy number 2 comes back to the apartment and finds the guy's body. But he doesn't come back to the apartment. Sorry. There was one part that I forgot here. In the course of the fight, Liam Neeson gets thrown through the cardboard wall that separates one apartment from the other.
Yes.
And so they escape through that hole in the wall, whereas bad guy number 2 comes up through the front door again. And as they escape the apartment, they find that Baiko is dead at the bottom of the staircase. So they killed Baiko because they obviously had to have followed him, I guess, to find her because they knew, I don't know. And then they get away. And they immediately go to... and the other thing, too, is that the other thing that also told me that something was off here, obviously, is that he fought way too good for a bioscientist.
But at the same time, he didn't fight good enough. This is one of the times that I was like, he didn't fight good for an action movie.
Yeah, you would have thought like the muscle, like in the Bourne Identity, it made sense. He had this muscle memory. He had these instincts that had been honed. that that were more like lizard brain stuff rather than stuff that was on the forefront of his memory of facts and figures and such. That made a lot more sense that he knew that. In this one, yeah, like you say, it's very selective what little pieces of his training and apparently very successful past to this point leak back in. But anyway, so then they have a car chase. So they get into the taxi that Baiko left, and they start to leave, and then bad guy number 2 chases them down in a van. And we have Bourne Identity level combat driving. Like Liam Neeson is pulling stuff that you saw in Taken and that you would have previously seen in the Bourne Identity, just moving that car left, right, and center and all over the place and doing moves and maneuvers that no mortal man could pull off. But yet this bioscientist does.
The one thing I will say about that, though, is this is like the most boring action chase I've seen in a long time. At least in Bourne, I mean, you have it's high speed. There's actually the one part of this, they're driving and the bad guy is keeping him on a train track, and there's a tram coming at him. And how does he fix it? He just has to hit the gas a little harder.
Yes.
Like, no. No. This is a guy who has already pulled a gun on you in the car.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, never again pulls that gun to fire it.
No, you would have thought the first thing to do is like try to fire through the window or something. Nope, doesn't do it.
They're driving side by side for quite a while. Never shoots at him. Not once.
But and the other thing too is that the good guys crash. The good guys do the bad guy crash where they flip the car, which is really weird. And I thought, well, okay, that's interesting, but they both survive without any scratches on them.
Plus, the only reason they were able to do that is because the bad guy also crashed.
Right. And so the car crashes, they get out of the car just as a tram hits it, and they run away. And I also thought, at that moment, I also thought, that is going to be one mad taxi cab owner, that he's lost 2 cars in like 2 days. So it's like, but anyway. And they immediately run to a dance club where our taxi driver knows the bouncer outside, and he lets them in past everybody else.
Yeah.
So they go to a disco, and there's this other weird sequence where he's walking through the disco, and he starts seeing all the lights and everything and the music, and he starts having this sort of, you think he's going to have like this big flashback to something, but he doesn't. And then he walks to a back room where suddenly the volume drops to nothing, even though they're in the middle of a dance club.
It's amazing how that happened. Dance clubs in movies have the best soundproofing ever.
Yeah. And we see the bad guy go immediately to the dance club, but pass by because I guess he looks at the line and figures, oh, they're not there. So he goes on like, okay, but why would he know to go that direction in Berlin of all time? Like, okay, whatever. Anyway, so the bad guy's out of the picture for the time being. And then we get the sob story from the taxi driver's name is Gina, by the way. So Gina tells us her sob story about how she escaped Bosnia and everything else, and she's on the run again, and she's all mad at Liam Neeson for getting her involved in this. And again, trying to establish some kind of dynamic between these two that just doesn't work because there's no chemistry in the dialogue or how the characters have interacted to this point.
Well, this isn't a slight against the actors to say this, but those two actors have no chemistry together anyway. There is nothing about them that I wouldn't even buy 2 strangers who met on a train with these two, just because there's nothing that clicks.
Yeah, nothing that they are given to do establishes anything meaningful between these two characters, and yet they operate as though they are bound to one another, essentially. I mean, there's nothing at this point. There's nothing stopping Gina from just saying, "Fuck this, I'm out. I'm not involved," and just leaving. I mean, she's not even supposed to be there in the first place.
Yeah, it's not like he's ever saved her from harm or anything. It makes no sense. So
he's sitting in the back of the room before they have this little Bosnia conversation, or somewhere in there. He's sitting there with the little book that he's had since the beginning of this, and just then he understands that the numbers in the back of the book, there's like 4 sets of 3 numbers. He suddenly understands that the 4 sets of 3 numbers are referring to pages in the little book, and then the line on that page, and then the word on that line. And that he puts together these 4 words, and they end up being Latin for 2 different kinds of flowers.
Yes.
Okay, now that's important for the plot. How they know this, why they do this, and why there's an exact copy of the book in other guys' hands, twins' hands, doesn't make any fucking sense. I don't know. it's weird. Why would they have a code for this? I don't know.
You know, the explanation they give for the twin, I have no problem with that. Him having an identical copy of that book, no sense at all.
Sure, the backstory.
No sense at all.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to use this as part of your cover, okay, why? We'll get there. We're almost there. This movie actually doesn't have a whole lot to it. We're going into way more detail than this movie really cares to tell you anyway.
It's odd because it is a 2-hour fucking movie.
Yeah. So then after the nightclub deal, we're suddenly with the PI. They finally meet up with the PI, and Liam Neeson's wearing a beanie hat, I guess, just out of the blue. And so that's when the PI tells them about the backstory of Prince Shada and the assassination attempts and how he and Bressler are trying to end world hunger. And they start talking about what the codes mean. Oh, it means two different flowers. It's really weird. And then I'm still fuzzy on exactly how they knew where to go, but then they find out where the wife and the twin are. And they start following him spy style, like she's scouting for him.
They do explain this. That is actually explained. It goes back to the itinerary. Because
that's right. That's right.
You remember in the taxi cab ride after the airport, when she talks about going to see the artist, he goes, "I will meet you there," just like when we saw it in Chicago. So that's the explanation for how they know where she is, and they know where he would be because he was supposed to have lunch with whoever that day. So that was explained. They did hit that.
Okay, so he goes to the art gallery. She's watching the twin at this lunch that he's supposed to be at.
Yes.
And so he follows her into the art gallery. Bad guy number 2 is there, stalking around, because I guess they knew that he might come there, I suppose. And eventually he's able to corner her. And alone, somehow, even though she's so important to this whole plot. And she effectively acknowledges that she knows him. She gives the fact that she admits that this was all basically a setup, and that you need to find your briefcase. She's giving him clues as to how to solve the riddle.
Yes.
Which is really weird given what we find out later about his part in everything.
Yes.
There's a throwaway line from a different character we haven't met yet that kind of explains it, I suppose, but it's really weird. So she sends him off on a new mission to go get that briefcase. And he runs away without being caught by bad guy number 2.
Yes, he slips away.
Okay, now we jump back to PI. And PI is getting back to his home, and in his door is an envelope with the photographs from the airport security that shows that our friend Liam was there with his wife when he said he was. It's the first actual tangible proof we have, at least in the world of the story, that Liam Neeson was telling the truth.
Yeah, see, one of the problems
it's really...
Oh, so sorry. One of the problems I had when I was watching this movie, because like I said, I watched it thinking this was an action movie. So as I watched the first half of it, all I'm seeing is all these plot holes. Like, none of this makes sense. Why the hell? Once you realize that it's a spy story, it does make a lot more sense.
Yes.
But this part here with his wife telling him, go get your briefcase, they kind of give us a half-ass explanation for how that worked.
Yeah.
But this is still one of the major holes I had with this, because even though he does go get his briefcase, and she plants this big smoochy kiss on him, just to solidify the idea. And we see Gina see this kiss, and I think she's supposed to be jealous there.
Yes, that was the idea I got, that she's like uncomfortable seeing him kissing another woman. I'm like, why?
It's his wife, for fuck's sake. As far as you know, it's his wife.
Right. As far as for everything that you have any idea about. And how they go get the briefcase isn't anything that the twin couldn't have done.
Exactly.
Well, and actually take it back. Given what's inside the briefcase, he would have a hard time explaining it. So maybe I'm giving the movie more credit. Anyway, we'll get to that. Well, anyway, there's one thing that we forgot to mention at this point. There's two people in Liam Neeson's professional life that he's been trying to get to verify who he is. First is Dr. Bressler, who he's never met in person before. And the other one is this friend of his from back home named Rodney Cole, who's also a doctor who's known for like 15 years. And he's tried a couple of times to call that guy, but he's always gotten a voicemail. Well, the PI had gotten a hold of Rodney Cole earlier, amazingly, and somehow he's able to get him to come to Germany all of a sudden.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
He never got a hold of him. He had just left a message. And
right, yes.
Rodney shows up in Berlin. And this is another one of my favorite parts of this movie, is they have a phone conversation.
Yes.
Where secret police guy tells Rodney what's going on. And it takes like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Because if you listen to there's no place in this sequence where it's like, okay, he listened for 10 minutes to hear the whole story.
Right.
It's like, yeah, I got calls from you and from Martin. What's going on? Oh my God, that's horrible.
Yeah. And the other thing that's a big cue to anybody who's watching this movie who knows anything about actors is we find out that Rodney Cole's played by Frank Langella. And Frank Langella basically just plays villains.
Yes,
he rarely plays a good guy. He was Skeletor, for crying out loud. And one of his best villain turns, in my opinion, was in The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp, which is a great movie, save for the fact that it was directed by our Roman Polanski. That's the one down point of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, as soon as I saw Frank Langella, I was like, okay, well, he's the bad guy. I didn't even need to guess. I'm just like, okay, he's part of the setup and everything else. And after he gets off the phone with Frank Langella or Rodney Cole, Stasi guy, for some reason, and I'm assuming the implication is that his Stasi training or some knowledge that he has about old spy stuff kicks in. He's like, Rodney Cole, Leipzig. And so he has a notion ahead of time that Rodney Cole is not who he says he is and that he's probably in danger. That's the implication I got from that little conversation.
Well, yeah, and the movie justifies exactly what you said there.
Yeah. So then Cole shows up at the PI's apartment. I mean, somehow I guess technically he was supposed to be in Berlin for the conference himself. That was the explanation, I think.
No. He's what he tells Stasi on the phone is that he decided to come because he wanted to see the last day of the conference. He decided to support his friend Martin.
Right. Okay. So Rodney Cole goes to the PI. The PI is very pointedly pulling out a very specific tin for tea or something off his shelf before Cole gets there. And, my first thought, he's going to try to poison Rodney Cole.
Yep, that's what I thought.
So they have this conversation, which is all sort of play acting, and they both sort of know it. I think it's one of those things where it's like, if this was a different movie in a different context and these characters have been established in a different way, this could have been a really, really dramatic, epic sort of confrontation. Because I could imagine a different scenario where we'd seen these two characters sort of slowly making their way towards each other throughout an entire other film, and this is the big confrontation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would have been great. For what it was, that is actually a very excellent scene. It's just the wrong movie for that scene.
Yeah, there's all these little bits of this movie that are great scenes for another movie.
Yes.
and in this one in particular, you have really good actors. You have Klaus Kinski and Frank Langella. These two guys know how to do drama and know how to do gravitas, and they really do a good job in this scene. But again, in isolation, it's great. In the context of the movie, it's weird. So they start having this sort of like, how long have you known Martin? And they go back and forth. And pretty quickly, they both understand that they both know exactly where they're both coming from. They're both spies. And Stasi guy gives this grand exposition about Section 15, which was this super uber secret team of assassins that have been operating since the Cold War, who would, they were freelancers and they'd take any job, especially complicated ones. And he sort of thinks that that's who's been trying to take out the prince this entire time or something. And so Stasi guy drinks his own tea and he kills himself with cyanide in the arms of this other guy. And again, it's sort of like, it's sort of weird. It's like these two cold warriors, comrade in arms kind of things. And later on, the Rodney Cole guy even says he died well. You know, like they are old cold warriors.
There's an excellent part in the death scene where Stasi guy says, "You never think you can actually do it."
Mm-hmm.
And then Rodney goes, "Yes, but the best ones do."
Yeah, it's this weird, again,
it's an amazing scene, just not for this movie.
It has all this really awesome subtext. Like there's a great well, the British miniseries version's better, but it's called Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. And the original starred Alec Guinness from Star Wars and everything, but there was a remake recently with Benedict Cumberbatch and a couple and a bunch of other people. And like an old classic spy movie is where this scene belonged.
Yes, yes.
It really did. And these two actors could have, God, I wish I could have seen that movie. That's the movie I wanted to see. There's all these little moments where I wish I could have seen that movie. This one's not awful, but there are greater movies out of this. Anyway, so Stasi kills himself in order to protect Martin, but also because he knows he's not getting out of the situation. He's an old, decrepit man. This guy is a trained assassin. No matter what happens in this room, he's going to die.
Right.
So he has no out. He knows this, so he kills himself. And so, you know, it doesn't really help or harm our hero at that point, but that wasn't the point. He was a loose end kind of thing. So then we jump back to Liam Neeson and Taxi Driver getting the briefcase, and he remembers the combination of the briefcase at the Lost and Found, so he can prove that the briefcase actually belongs to him, and inside is all these passports and identification and stuff that shows that, yes, he is who he says he is, or at least who he thinks he is. And then they're sitting at a table in like the cafeteria where they're waiting for the wife. The wife said she'd meet him at the airport. So they're waiting for the wife to show up, and Taxi Driver gives him back his watch as he gives her a whole ton of cash, which again, this time he's got cash that came out of the briefcase. So that made a little bit more sense. And it's more than enough to get the papers that she needs or get legal, whatever it is. And so she leaves. Rodney Cole appears at the airport sort of saying, "Hey, you know, what's going on? Liz called me and told me to come pick you up." And so they exit.
This is a part I have a problem with, because I didn't catch him saying that Liz had said to come pick him up.
I think he. I'm trying to think back now why he was there, but I can't think of any other reason other than They
never say, which is a huge problem, because he should have been like,
okay,
how the fuck did you know I'm at the airport?
Yeah, okay. Maybe I'm filling in a blank. Maybe I'm being far too generous to the movie, because I thought there was some throwaway explanation as to why he showed up, but anyway,
they don't give one.
Rodney walks him out of the airport to a van where he's immediately tasered in the neck in front of everybody. But the only person who sees it is Gina, who's watching from across the walkways or whatever. And bad guy number 2 is there with the van, of course. So we know that, he's in on it. And so then we almost have car chase number 2, except we don't.
Right. The van is speeding away. Why it's speeding, I don't know. There's no reason for it to, because as far as the two bad guys know, nobody saw what happened.
Right.
But so Gina steals a cab.
She steals a station wagon cab.
Yes, and follows them.
Yes.
There's actually a great scene there where she takes off. Maybe this station wagon has a self-closing hatch, but otherwise it makes no sense why the hatch closed. The only way it would have closed is if she hit the brake, but as she's taking off, it closes. But she's a little bit behind them, so she actually loses them. Mm-hmm. And she's driving, and she just happens to look up at a parking garage, I'm guessing.
A big parking structure, yeah.
And just happens to see right where they parked in full view of everybody, to see them get ready to kill a man.
Right. So then we have the big reveal scene where we learn, and this is the first thing I thought of as soon as Rodney Cole looks down at him and says, because they're going to kill him, you know, because it's like, and he's like, you screwed up everything, and he's like, who am I? And he's like, you're a excellent assassin and one of my best boys. And the first thing that came to my head was, Liam Neeson is Revan. And I was like, oh my God. And so we find out that Liam Neeson was the team leader, essentially, of this group of assassins who were planning to take out the prince, or at least that's the implication from his memories that suddenly come back to him. And Twin is his backup. He had an understudy for this in case something went wrong. But unfortunately, because Liam Neeson got hit on the head, he is remembering the cover for his character in this assassination plot that he meticulously created in order to have a whole backstory and sort of establish this guy's a real person in order to do all the stuff they had to do. He's remembering that as his real identity, not his real identity. And so he's been running around in total recall mode this whole time, thinking that he's Quaid and not Hauser, basically.
Yes.
And so he has all these flashes back, and they're about to kill him. They're about to make it look like he was an overdosed junkie. When all of a sudden, Gina arrives again to save the day, because Gina's the superhero of this story, not Liam Neeson.
Yes, indeed. She's the badass of the movie.
Yeah, she runs over. I'm summarizing things a bit, but she drives up. She runs over bad guy number 2, and then pushes the van off of the parking structure with Rodney Cole in it, that then crashes and explodes.
Yeah, that's not a very well-made vehicle, because it just explodes on impact.
Well, it's the pinnacle of German engineering.
Indeed.
But in the course of this, the briefcase that's still there also got busted, and there's a false back to it. There's all these other fake passports and things that show him having all like a blank passports and such like that, which kind of become relevant later. So now that he's had all his memories restored, basically, or at least his memories of the plan or what's going to happen, he remembered that he planted a bomb in the prince's suite 3 months back with his wife when his wife had dark hair. But he didn't do anything to change his appearance, so why nobody at the hotel recognized him the second time around, fuck if I know. Because they stayed at the Eisenhower suite. If somebody's going to stay at like the super suite that a prince of is going to stay at, you'd think you'd remember that guy's face.
Yeah.
Even 3 months after the fact, you'd think, oh, that's like the guy who rented the biggest, best suite in the entire hotel. Well, anyway. So there's this giant bomb that's got 50, 60 pounds of C4 just locked into the wall that they hid in there in preparation for this big assassination plot.
We're coming up to two of my other favorite parts of this movie.
Sure.
So he understands now that his wife is an assassin. Everybody involved is an assassin.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to go try to stop it. Meanwhile, there's a party going on in the suite.
Yes.
And at this party, the prince is there. Professor, say his name for me. I forget it.
Bressler,
thank you.
And his children. His 2 daughters. They're all at this party, and while they're there, the professor doesn't want to let go of his bag, which has his computer in it. Wifey chick talks him into just hanging it up on the coat rack. For no good reason.
And she slips a little Wi-Fi thing into it.
Remote Wi-Fi USB thing into it out of her bracelet. This is where it becomes a Mission Impossible setup, because you could have taken this entire sequence and put it into a Mission Impossible movie, and it would have been effectively the exact same kind of deal.
Yes, and so she goes into another room and fires up her computer and downloads all the data.
Right. Presumably the information on the strain of corn, his research and everything.
Yes.
Because all of his research is only on this one laptop that he has. Nobody else could possibly have a copy.
And here's where we find out what all of those numbers at the back of the book referenced.
Yeah, this is the part that is the most inexplicable, the fuck are you talking about moment.
So in this book, which Liam Neeson and his doppelganger carry around all the time,
with duplicate notes of the numbers in it, by the way.
Exactly, duplicates. They're exactly the same thing. So she has to look it up. She looks it up and finds the 2 names of the flowers. One is a password to open the computer. The other is a password to open the file she wants.
Mm-hmm.
She downloads them, and the professor just can't take it anymore. He goes to get his computer back, and she gets there just in time to remove the little doohickey.
Yeah.
Everything's safe.
So now, okay, so here's the big question. It's like, okay, we find out later that the Latin names that you get out of this book with those codes equate to the professor's daughter's names, Lily and Laurel, which are both flowers. Yes. Okay, so that's his password. So if you already know that, why are you having a book with a code in the back? What's the purpose of this? I mean, if the book itself had been some kind of MacGuffin they also had to get in order to get his passwords, that might make sense. But they've got it the entire time, so they already know the answer to the question, what are the numbers there for? So why have the book? The book makes no sense. It's an unnecessary piece of drama put in the thing. She could have been downloading the stuff, and I mean, you might as well have had like some, magic hacking program they just boot up when they finally get the little Wi-Fi thing plugged in. Mm-hmm. It would have made as much sense and had as much effect on the plot as this thing.
Yeah, they just did it so they could throw in the little girls and make it a little more dramatic when the bomb is about to go off.
I guess.
So here, while all of this is going on, Liam Neeson has arrived at the hotel, and he's telling the hotel manager,
the security guy again. Yeah, the security guy again is like,
and so he says to him, "There's a bomb in that room. I know. I planted it."
Yes.
And nobody calls the police.
Nobody immediately calls the police, but he does tell them, look at the security footage from this particular date, and boom, there's Liam Neeson, there's his wife with dark hair. So his story checks out, and only then do they set off the alarms and say everybody's got to evacuate.
And there's a great scene where the wife decides she's not going to let the bomb go off because there's no reason to now.
Yeah, which doesn't make any sense. You're going to kill everybody anyway. Why do you care?
Yeah, I mean, they have your picture. She says, "I don't want my picture associated with a bomb going off that we didn't need." Well, there was no need.
The picture's already associated with everything. You're already here. You're already part of the party. Everybody who was involved in that party, if they don't find your body in the explosion, they're going to be wondering who the fuck you are and where you are.
Yeah, so the security guy hits the alarm and everybody starts leaving. Mm-hmm. The prince is out. The professor is leaving with his daughters. He's carrying one and the other one's running, holding his hand, and they get separated for half a second. And somehow this leads to the daughter going the completely opposite direction.
Yeah.
But
ending up in the twins' hands. The twin hands the daughter back over to Bressler.
Yes.
And then he's going to kill him.
He's going to kill him because she told him to wrap up the loose end. Wrap up the loose end, which in this case is Bressler.
Yeah.
But right as he's about to strike, who shows up?
Liam Neeson. And then he's got his full memories back as soon as he looks at the guy.
Not yet. Sorry. Not yet. He doesn't get his full memories back until the girl goes to stop the bomb.
Yes.
And she goes to break the mirror. And for some reason, it has become unbreakable. She's beating on this mirror, and instead of breaking the mirror, because that doesn't work anymore, she goes through the wall.
Which she could have done in the first place.
Why would you go through? Why would it? Why? Okay, I understand that the cab driver lived in a shitty place with cardboard walls. Mm-hmm. But this is a 5-star hotel, and it's easier to go through the fucking wall.
So here's what makes more sense for that is that somehow, and again, this is a story we never saw. 3 months previous, they removed a section of the wall in the hotel, installed this gigantic bomb, and then overlaid their hole they put in there with, like, I guess, cheap plaster and reproduction wallpaper so that nobody could tell that anything has ever been done to the room. Well, so that spot on the wall being weaker than the rest, I could buy, given how they established the bomb's construction.
But when they do the bomb, when they show the bomb, him installing it, he puts a mirror back in front of it.
Yes.
So presumably this is still the same mirror.
And she couldn't just knock it off the wall and then go through the wall, I guess. I don't know.
It's a mirror.
It doesn't make any sense.
It is the strongest mirror.
Well, her going back to the bomb doesn't make any sense either. Her going back to the bomb at all makes zero sense. It's like, okay, if the bomb goes off, what happens? Well, a whole bunch of evidence is probably destroyed. You might be able to make the argument that you disappeared in the explosion because you were the host of the party. Everybody saw you there. People were taking pictures with their cameras. Your face is going to be associated with this event, whether you like it or not. So that little explanation made no fucking sense. So the bomb goes off, boom. Yeah.
these are the only international spies like this that don't change their appearance other than hair color.
Yeah, I was like,
there's no fake noses, no beards. It's just them.
So anyway, and the thing about loose ends in this, and this is the second time I forgot to mention when Rodney Cole is confronting Liam Neeson, he says the throwaway line of like, "Oh, and thanks for going back to the airport to get that briefcase. That's a little loose end that's just messy," or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, guys, you want to talk about messy loose ends? Let's review the last hour and a half of this movie. It's just like, fuck me. So anyway, so she's trying to disable the bomb rather than pull a hole in this wall, because she busts a hole in the wall finally, but she only makes a hole large enough to fit her hand through and then blindly reach down towards the detonator keypad where presumably she can disarm the bomb.
Mm-hmm.
And she's reaching and she can't see the keypad. She doesn't know where her fingers are going, but she knows somehow she's instinctually going to know where to hit the button. So she's reaching for, we see the timer counting down to like 19 seconds or whatever. And she doesn't do it. And the bomb goes off and she's completely obliterated.
I will say, I did enjoy that part. They didn't let her out.
Yes.
It just makes no sense why she would be that committed to it.
It makes no sense why she'd be that committed. It makes no sense why she would have gone back to the bomb. It just doesn't. Anyway, so then the building is rocked. Half the building is blown off the top.
Here's where he gets his memory back.
Because
when the bomb goes off, a piece of ceiling hits him in the face.
Yes. And then all of a sudden, everything comes flooding back.
Dun, dun, dun.
And then we have the big boss fight with Aidan Quinn. And then we have the symbolic moment of truth where like Aidan Quinn's got him in a chokehold and he's strangling him to death and everything. And they're looking at a mirror, right? Mm-hmm. And so this big symbolic moment where these two guys who are living each other's lives and all this other stuff, and then identity and like what's the duality of identity and all sorts of stuff. And then Liam Neeson breaks the mirror with his fist, grabs a shard of it, and just slices Aidan Quinn to death.
Yes.
And that's when Gina suddenly shows up, because her being there all of a sudden makes perfect sense into a bomb, a war zone, effectively. Bomb has gone off, everyone's been evacuated, but she's still there. And then they escape. We get some news.
There's no police presence. Nobody stops them. Somehow they just wander off into the night.
Yeah, they wander off. We get some closing exposition with news reports about how Bressler and the Prince introduced this new strain of corn for basically open source, solve world hunger thing. And it kind of reminded me of the end of The Saint, where like cold fusion is suddenly available to everybody kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, so we get the happy ending of that. And then Liam Neeson, who now knows he is an international professional assassin. He has killed God knows how many people prior to this, and only got a sense of conscience when he lost his memory. And Gina knows this too. I mean, she knows what he did. She knows what his background is now. He told her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're together. And now they've got fake IDs with the same last name. I guess presumably they're now husband and wife-ish.
Yeah.
They get on a train and we're done. That's it. They're off and running. They get away with it. Nothing happens. Does he turn himself in? No, he's off and running to do what? Go where?
Well, they're just going to get a little boutique, and then that's how they'll live the rest of their lives.
Yeah, he's going to, I mean, then you'd have Unknown 2, where like they come back after him, and it's not Born Identity or anything. No.
This movie so badly wanted to be Born Identity. There are so many plot points that are identical.
And there is a better movie hidden within this movie. Like I said, some of these specific scenes, if they'd been connected to a better plot, would have been epic, especially the one between the two Cold Warriors. I thought, God damn it, that is so good. That shouldn't be in this movie.
That is such a good scene. And the American giving the German the respect for having the balls to take his own life rather than deal with what he knew he would have to deal with.
Yeah.
It's such a good scene.
You know what that scene belonged in? That scene belonged in a movie where we see the lives of those two characters on opposite sides of the equation, never having met during the Cold War. Like, do you remember The Good Shepherd? Did you ever see that one, Robert De Niro and Matt Damon, about the founding of the CIA, all that stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, great spy movie, but it spans decades, and it goes over like the founding of the CIA all the way up through like the Cuban Missile Crisis and everything. The movie that scene belonged in was at the end of a movie where we see these two characters from youth through maturity to old age operating in the shadows, and that is their meeting. That is the first time after all these years they've only had code names for one another. They've never known each other. In fact, they might have had some kind of weird sort of in the shadows correspondence through like 3 different people, and they thought they were double agents. Like some really epic sort of combat that never took place in person for decades. And all of a sudden, this is the moment they meet, and one has to go, and it's the Stasi guy. That would have been a great sort of patriotic American movie, sort of spy thriller. That'd have been great.
Yeah,
not this fucking movie.
The problem with this movie, like I said, it desperately wanted to be the Bourne Identity. And it had flavors of it. It really did. Yeah. The problem is the only time it really worked is when they directly stole from it.
Yeah.
And they tried to take another course and make it a different movie, and they didn't do a very good job. A lot of the things that I hated about the beginning when I was watching it, before I realized what I was watching, I was much more forgiving of once I understood what was going on.
Yeah.
But the movie itself, again, it's not a horrible movie. It is a bad movie. It's not a horrible movie.
Yeah.
If you got time to kill and you've seen everything else that's on, yeah, watch it. It's not horrible. I'd rather watch Taken if I'm looking for a Liam Neeson movie. I'd rather watch The Bourne Identity if I'm looking for a amnesia-driven spy thriller. But they should have just made a new Bourne movie, because it's desperately what this movie wanted to be. Yeah. And why they threw in the Mission Impossible stuff at the end, I don't know, because we didn't need to see that. We really didn't.
Well, and the logic of it, like I said, doesn't make any sense. It's like, okay, so you want to get the scientists' research because it's super duper valuable on the black market, let's say. Okay, or that's what the client asked for. We never find out who the client is exactly.
Right.
That hired them to do this assassination. But presumably, and it turns out, of course, they weren't trying to assassinate the prince so much as they're trying to assassinate the scientist because he was a threat to the global market or whatever. So you want to get his research in order that, whoever the client is can have the leg up on the whole thing. But again, there's no way in hell that one laptop is the only place that his research is kept. No way. As well financed as this thing is by some Arabian prince, everything else, he's got backups in 17 different places if anything happened to him, because they got to know he's under threat. They got to know there's an assassination threat against the prince himself. So for fuck's sake, that doesn't make any sense.
Here's what I don't get. They go with this Mission Impossible scene. They've got this bomb there. The plan was always to kill the prince and Bressler.
Yeah, the whole 9 yards.
So why not just, once you get him to put down his briefcase, switch it out and leave?
Yeah, just leave with the briefcase
and let it blow up.
Then you don't even need to wait. And then you leave with the briefcase. As soon as you're clear of the hotel, either the timer goes off or you hit the switch, whichever comes first, and you're done.
What we didn't talk about, and I'm sorry we missed this, is that it is explained to us that it's made to look like the prince is the target when he really wasn't.
Right. Yeah.
And
whatever good that does.
Yeah. Well, if you're going with the bomb, which is what they were doing, it makes sense. You go with the bomb because we've already seen somebody try to suicide bomb him.
Right.
You blow up everybody. Nobody's even going to look at the professor. Nobody's going to go look at what his other notes were. Nobody's going to care because he was collateral damage. When she goes, just go tie up loose ends. So what she's saying is it's a much better idea than the bomb to just run up behind this guy and stab him.
Yeah, and presumably also his little daughters.
Yeah, that's not going to raise any eyebrows. No. None at all.
And the other thing, too, is that, okay, and as far as and again, I know I'm harping on this, but it just dumbfounds me. And also, I wanted to point out real quick, the next 6 minutes said Liam Neeson in The Bourne Complacency. Yeah.
Yes.
So the other thing too is that, okay, why would you send the same people that are going to enact the assassination to plant the bomb?
Yeah, yeah.
Why wouldn't you send a different pair? Because as soon as that bomb goes off, I mean, the original plan was the bomb goes off, the investigators are going to be able to pinpoint where the explosion occurred. Okay. And then they're going to check the security footage for like the last 5 years or something, which wasn't damaged in the explosion, to find out who was there. And you're going to see the same faces that you saw who were hosting the event. It doesn't make any fucking sense. It just, oh God, I love a good spy movie. I really do. I mean, I grew up on like James Bond stuff. I loved The Bourne Identity when it first came out because I thought, man, this is going to set a new bar for Bond movies. Too bad the Bond movies stuck with superhero bullshit. Not that The Bourne Identity didn't evolve into that later, but the first one was really good. I love a good spy thriller, especially one that's cerebral and got a lot of twists and turns and stuff, like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. So when you're going to set up something like that where details are the plot and the twists and turns are weighted on the facts that you present the audience, like it is a murder mystery movie or like a Murder, She Wrote or something, if you don't make it at least as smart as your audience probably will be, it's not good, and don't do it. I don't know what else to say.
No, yeah, you're right. This again, I still enjoyed the movie for the most part. It's one that if you can turn it off and just enjoy it, I think you could enjoy it. But I think you'd be much better off watching Bourne. You really would, even if you went to the Bourne Supremacy, or once it did get just silly, where he was like, anyway. This movie could have been so much better. It really could have. The premise isn't bad.
No, it's Bourne Identity.
But like the going back for the bomb.
Oh God. Jesus.
I don't understand how you get to that point in this movie.
You just wanted to see the wife get blown up. I guess that's like some sort of comeuppance, some sort of like the bad guys all die.
But at that point, I mean, she's not. That made her a little more human than she needed to be.
You know what it is? You know what I think it is? I think it was the movie, the writer of the movie, tying up loose ends. I mean, literally, if you're looking at it from an aspect of, okay, this movie has to end with Liam Neeson getting away, scot-free, like he's free. His entire team that we know of to this point has to die. So bad guy number 1, bad guy number 2, Aidan Quinn, Franco Langella, and wife. They all have to die.
Yes.
In order for him to make a clean getaway, that we don't have any loose ends for this character. Because God forbid we want to do a sequel to this movie. We don't want to have a recurring thing or anything else. So I think killing her in that way, as awkward and stupid and nonsensical as it was the writer tying up his own loose ends.
But why not have Gina, who at this point has been pretty badass, kill her when she was like going to kill Liam? Say Liam has to die for their plot point to work, you know, because he is the loose end at this point. So Gina has to kill him.
Well, we have to end on an explosion, dude. We have to end on an explosion.
Yeah.
We don't have anything else to do in a PG-13 movie except for car chases and explosions. We can't show blood. We can't show uber violence. We can't show sex. So the only excitement we have is if there's an explosion at the end to sort of cap off everything. And we have to have a reason why Liam Neeson bumps his head again.
Yes, because that part pissed me off so bad.
It couldn't happen in the fight. It couldn't just happen in the fight with Aidan Quinn. No, it has to happen in the explosion. Okay, whatever. Anyway. So I guess that's about that.
A piece of fucking ceiling hits him in the face, and not only does it not knock him out, it actually brings back the super badass.
Oh, God. Yeah.
I remember a few things.
Yeah. I have a certain set of skills. Thank you, ceiling.
Yes. Unknown to the unknower. Thank you. The next 6 minutes. Yes. Again, I wouldn't have reviewed this movie if I realized what kind it was, because we did have to spoil everything.
Yes.
But I did want to talk to you about a few ideas with this. I enjoyed doing a full movie.
Sure.
But we have had so many people requesting movies for us to do.
Yes.
There's no way we're ever going to get to them all.
No. Well, depends on how long we're doing this, I suppose. But
well, true. Have you seen how many movies people have asked us to do?
Practically everything.
Dozens and dozens.
Yeah, practically everything everyone has mentioned that I can recall at this time, I have seen. I don't own them all, which is the problem. That's the other thing. And I don't know what's on Netflix or anything else. So we are constrained not only by the availability of things, if we can buy them, but also just trying to buy these things in a timely fashion for the sake of doing such a review.
Well, this would be something, if you didn't want to host it on your channel, that I would be willing to do. I want to do a shorts version of this,
okay.
where we don't actually go into full detail on everything, just giving our general memories of certain movies. Because like one that keeps coming up is Beverly Hills Cop, which I love. It's a great movie. But that's not. It was such a popular movie. I don't want to. The whole name of this is movies you should have watched, and everybody watched Beverly Hills Cop back then.
Yeah.
But it's not a movie that's not worth talking about.
Sure.
But like an hour and a half where we go over like 3 movies just as we remember them.
Oh, without having to watch them? Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah. So yeah, and I'm fine with that. I mean, obviously, I remember gists of movies far better than I do the details if I haven't seen them in a while. But no, I'm cool with that. That's actually probably better because I don't have to like take a bunch of notes and try to remember specific plot points down to the nitty gritty all the time.
Yeah, I would still like to do what we've done so far because I've enjoyed this so much. This series is so much fun, but especially like with Halloween coming up. I would love to do a Halloween show where we go over different scary.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, just like the big ones like Elm Street and Friday the 13th and Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Man. Yeah, sure. For next time, do we want to decide that now or think about it? Because
it's up to you. Because it's going to be on your channel, so your call.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know what to do. Well, first off, I don't know what you have or have access to is the thing. I've got lots of movies, tons of movies. So my library is pretty big.
I have tons of movies, but when it comes to ones like these, the lesser knowns, I have a lot of them on VHS, but I don't have a VHS player anymore.
Yeah.
So
let me. Yeah, so we need to do an inventory at some point of like what stuff we each have that we can go off of to some extent. I mean, I know I got a ton of movies, you got a ton of movies.
And there's also Netflix. I have Netflix, Hulu, I have Amazon Prime, so I have access to a ton of movies too.
Well, do you want to do another buddy cop-ish movie from the 90s kind of thing, or do you want to try something different?
I'm open to anything. I prefer the action genre.
Because I was just thinking, because we open up this show talking about like the lone guy coming to town and sort of cleaning things up.
Yeah.
Maybe it's too heavy, but it suddenly occurred to me maybe Unforgiven.
Oh.
Because I mean that is a movie that you should see. I mean, regardless of what era you're in, you need to see Unforgiven in my book. So I'm thinking we go west for the next one.
We can do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh fuck, I love that movie, and I do have that on DVD.
I'm pretty sure I have that movie on DVD. If I don't,
if not,
I will get
Walmart does carry it.
Yeah, I will find it one way or the other.
I don't know if it's still on Netflix. I know it was for a little while.
Oh wait, no, I did buy that. I went through a Wild West or Western action movie phase a while back, and I got a whole bunch of movies. So I have Unforgiven. Yeah.
The only reason I bought it because I love the movie, but it's not one I sit down and watch very often because it is a weighty movie. My son hadn't seen it, and I'm like, dude, you have to watch this. The next 6 minutes says that or Tombstone. I got dibs on Tombstone if we're doing that.
Yeah. Tombstone we can do on Monkey's channel. So why don't we do like a Wild West set for our next pair? So we'll do Unforgiven on my channel next week, and then we'll do Tombstone on yours the week after. Yeah, and if I don't have Tombstone myself, that'll give me 2 weeks to acquire a copy.
And from there, guys, I would like to set up the one I talked about where we do just like shorts. So again, we're not ignoring your suggestions when you give them. It's just there's only so many times in a day or so much time in a day.
Yeah, and the weeks. We're doing this one-off back and forth. But yeah, if we pick like genre night or something, and then just do like our offhand memories of like you know, a group of movies that are related to each other. Like for Halloween, we do the horror movies, or we pick like 4 sci-fi films or something like that.
Oh yeah, we should do a sci-fi night, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Anything else you wanted to throw in here?
No, I'd just like to thank everybody who showed up to watch this live and got themselves spoiled if you hadn't seen the movie or watched us pick apart something that you might have seen already.
Indeed.
Yeah, and the fact you guys show up for these is really flattering, and appreciate that. And we have a great time doing it, as nitpicky as we get, which is half the fun.
That is the fun.
Yeah.
Tonight we are on my channel for Lords of the Night at 9 p.m. Eastern time.
Yes, 6 p.m. Pacific.
Other than that, guys, we will see you tonight. Thanks so much for watching. Scribe, thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you later, guys.
Bye, guys.